Hello, salut, buongiorno, and welcome to another episode of the Traveler's Haven podcast series, where we look at all things true travel professionals need and need to hear. I'll be your host, Sam. Today, we have a realtor from the Niagara region who is dedicated to swiftly and securely helping homeowners in all their needs. I introduce Beverley North of Advantage Real Estate.
Hi, thanks very much for having me, Sam.
It's good to have you on, Beverly. I have a couple questions for you. We'll run through. We have some stuff on homeowning, we have some stuff on being a landlord, and we have some stuff on travel nurses. So we'll run through them and see how it goes.
Sounds wonderful.
So, could you share with my viewers who you are, what you do, and a little bit of how you do it?
Sure. Well, as you alluded to, my name is Beverley North. So I am with Coldwell Banker Advantage out of Welland, Ontario, which is part of the Niagara region. So as you alluded to, I am a realtor. So what I do is definitely match people and properties in ways that make sense for their lives. So I work from everyone from first-time home buyers to seasoned investors. And I also help renters find great homes and landlords find wonderful, reliable tenants. But outside of real estate, I am a mother to two amazing humans and four fantastic furry friends. So life at my house is always full of love and a little bit of chaos. Um, and as far as where do I work out of the Niagara region, which is in Ontario. So the Niagara region is in between two Great Lakes. And we have a lot of sandy beaches, we have vineyards and tons of green space. And of course, we're right next door to the big neighbor, which is the USA. And we're also in close proximity to the GTA. So we're commutable to areas such as Hamilton, Burlington, and also within about an hour and a half to the GTA areas.
Okay, yeah. I've been to that area once before on a little trip, and I have to say I thought it was very nice. So
Well, you're welcome to come back anytime.
I just might. So, as a landlord and a realtor, you most likely know the trends of the area and how they go for homeowners. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit of how it looks like they're going, if it's a good time for homeowners, if it's a bad time for homeowners.
So a bad time in terms of buying, right? And
Hmm.
that's what you're talking about. So in terms of buying, it is pretty much the same across Canada. So as with every buyer and seller out there, there is a lot of uncertainty as to what's going on because of the tariffs in the US, also the interest rates, and then you have, of course, the increased cost of living, which is affecting everybody. So all of those factors are impacting both purchasing as well as the resale and new sales of any homes that are happening across Canada. So, but with that being said, I will say that Niagara is still positioned as a really alternative to large city centers because of our proximity to all the different areas that I've alluded to. It's a great place to call home, and it's so small that a lot of people want to move their family here and live the life of being surrounded by green space and beaches and everything that Niagara has to offer.
Hmm. Yep, and the falls too. Can't forget the falls.
The falls as well and Niagara on the Lake. So we do have a lot of great spots, and a lot of spots that are not necessarily on the map, but they're like hidden little gems that are specific to Niagara.
Yeah, I would say so. But for those homeowners that are feeling priced out, what advice would you give them to maybe look forward to in the future? If not, maybe some advice for trends, maybe just some advice on how to keep positive on the whole situation.
Sure. Well, definitely home buyers. I do feel that, especially first-time home buyers, it's been a real difficult transition for all of these people to try to get into the housing market. Right now is still a good time for those first timers to get in. And the reason I say that is because the interest rates have kind of cooled the housing market and all of these economic uncertainties. So with that being said, houses here have gone down significantly since the pandemic. What's also interesting is that there is a lot of families that are now pairing up with, let's say, you have older parents with their young adult children that are moving in together, maybe grandparents. So there's a lot of multi-generational living happening. And as well, a lot of first-time home buyers are now seeking out places that either have an in-law suite potential in their basement, or they're looking to find something that they can renovate and add that into their home, because having the rent to offset the mortgage costs is certainly a huge help. So I would suggest anybody that is a first-time home buyer, or even if you're already in the market and you have concerns about your mortgage, go seek the assistance of a qualified mortgage broker. Talk with them about what the options are, because there is different options, especially for those who are first-time home buyers. There's different programs and things that even a realtor as myself, I wouldn't be on top of necessarily that information, because that's not my scope of expertise. So I really would recommend that people talk with a mortgage broker and kind of prepare themselves, because it might be a long-term plan. Like, sure, they may not be able to buy today, but with these different programs and with the proper planning, they may be able to buy within a year to 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And as is with most things, not going about it alone is the best way to do it. If you try and, just believe in your own sort of superficial knowledge on all these things, you'll probably end up getting left behind in the dust, especially when it comes to home buying. It's a very fast business.
It is a fast business, and there's definitely programs out there to help first-time home buyers, and even different nuances that you can build into an existing mortgage or new mortgage that a person who's already in the real estate arena can make use of. Like, some people don't know that if they already have a mortgage on their existing house and they want to transition to another, they may be able to report that mortgage without penalty, which is basically moving the mortgage from house A over to house B that they're moving to. But you don't know unless you ask the right questions of the right professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a similar topic, as someone who is in the Niagara region, what areas would you say someone who is travel bound for that location should go visit? Maybe sort of like a restaurant, maybe if there's a nicer area. I know obviously the falls, that's the one place I've been, but uh maybe some place that strikes your mind.
Sure. Well, there is tons of places to see throughout the Niagara region. Oftentimes, Fort Erie is an overlooked area, and Crystal Beach, it has wonderful restaurants. Um, Particularly, I would say if you want to visit Niagara Lake, I would go to the Old Angels Inn. It's actually the oldest. Um, I think it's the oldest inn in Ontario, and I think it was built in 1789. So there's tons of history there. We also have the wonderful Fort George and different historical forts around Niagara. If you're looking for the best donuts around, I would suggest Beechwood Donuts in St. Catharines. They're vegan, but they are just beyond imagination. Many people drive to come here for the donuts. If you're looking for, let's say, coffee, I would go to the Black Sheep Lounge in Welland. It's got great coffee. And last but not least, if you're coming to Niagara, you should be visiting a winery or two. There's Trius and Peller Estates Winery. There's definitely tons of things to see and do about Niagara.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The winery, especially those vineyards, those cannot be missed out on for sure.
They can't be missed out. There's also different breweries around too. So really it's your imagination wherever it wants to take you. But there is tons of things to see and do throughout the Niagara region throughout the year. So it's not just a summertime visit. You can come in the fall time, you can come in the winter and enjoy the ice wine festivals. So just come see what Niagara has to offer.
Absolutely. So, like I said earlier, we were going to talk about travel nurses and travel nurse houses is an especially prominent business that helps connect travel nurses with landlords to find accommodations for the travel nurse while also trying to find safe and what's the word I'm looking for? Confident housing for the landlord, someone who isn't going to flake out, bail, better than Airbnb in those ways. And I was wondering if this is something that you can maybe get behind, or if this doesn't exactly seem like something landlords should go for. I just wanted to know your take on it.
Sure. So definitely, I think in my personal viewpoint, I do believe that this avenue of longer term rentals with travel nurses and travel professionals is a great idea for landlords. It's a viable option because, as we know, there is some concerns at this point with landlords and tenants as far as it running as smoothly as it should. There are certainly some hiccups with that program. So having this as an alternative to offer many of my landlord clients, that's something that I have been doing because I think it's a great alternative. And it's also a great way to give back to the community because, as we know, nurses are the backbone of the hospital, right? And they are professionals. They're here to do a job to help out on busy times. And they're not going to overstay. They're welcome. They're here for a specific time period. And as we've talked about before, there are many times when the nurse's employer actually pays the landlord directly. So it kind of takes that whole financial concern out of the equation because we know that the landlord will be paid. And we also know that we'll be providing a very safe, furnished apartment to our nurses.
Yeah. And especially, I think it offers over Airbnb that guaranteedness on both sides for the travel nurse. So they can be sure that the place they're going to isn't some fake sale dine and dash type of house that, looks better on the ad. And then for the landlord, they can be sure that they're not, giving out to someone who's going to just throw a party and destroy the whole place. And then they come back and it's, oh, there goes my house.
It's so true. It's so true because a travel professional is not here to party.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially the nurses will do that night shift where, they'll come back late in the night or in the morning technically, and then sleep through the day and go back to the hospital. Really, they're there just to make the world a better place at the cost of their own health.
Yes. Although some people do prefer midnights, but I think majority of people would not choose that work schedule. But I agree. I think it's definitely a great alternative, and certainly something that is important to know is for people who are considering the Airbnb platform or short-term rentals, 30 days or under. If you do that in your home now in Canada, when you go to sell that home, it is now subject to HST when you sell it. That is a huge, huge obstacle, right? So if people use travel nurse professionals or travel professionals as an alternative and they're renting it out 31 days or more, now they don't have to worry about that HST component because they're still within the residential tenancy agreement. Whereas if they do it on the short term, let's say with a platform such as Airbnb to rent out the property, it's now subject to commercial licensing or commercial arena, and they will be charged HST upon sale of their home. So that is a huge factor for me. And certainly as a realtor, I do educate all of my landlords on that. Sometimes the short term is not the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And for nurses, as I tell most people, their assignments usually are about a month to 4 months. So you never have to worry about what Airbnb does, where, someone stays with you for 2 weeks. There you go. You're now subjected to that HST on sale. And that is a very big negative. And I think that's something that our company is definitely trying to get rid of, or trying to not get rid of, but I will say trying to prevent people from falling into a trap like that.
Exactly. So it's definitely the education piece. So it's educating all of the landlords or homeowners about the perils of opening it up to Airbnb. I mean, certainly it can be quite profitable, but it comes with a cost that will be, you know, bestowed upon the homeowner when they go to sell it. So,
And we did briefly touch upon this, but the Residential Tenancies Act. I did want to talk a little bit about how they handle maintenance and evictions, and if you think they should reconsider some of the ideas and terms that they have there, because I know some of them sort of act as pitfalls for landlords who are not educated enough to get a gotcha moment on them, really.
well, I do think that the Landlord Tenancies Act was certainly put in place with good intentions. It is to protect tenants, but I think that it's not a balanced platform at this point, and I think that's why we're finding a lot of landlords are shying away from the rental arena because of these concerns, right? So I do think that they should really tweak that whole landlord tenancy act to become more balanced, not just to protect the good tenants, because there's a wonderful amount of good tenants. They pay their rent. They just want to live peacefully in their home. But then there are the bad apples, which unfortunately have made it difficult for both the good tenants and the good landlords.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything specific that you think maybe you would give a call to action to reconsider, or is it just generally you think it should be looked over? I know there are a couple sort of issues with it that I've heard from a couple of my other guests, but I don't know if there's a specific one that maybe you want to talk on.
I wouldn't say there's anything specific. I honestly feel that the whole program should be overhauled because I think, unfortunately, like I said, there's a lot of good tenants that are being honestly penalized because of the bad tenants. And it's the same with there's a lot of good landlords, but there's also some slumlords. Let's be real. Like not all landlords are same.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the big issues when it comes to any sort of housing back and forth is that you have to put the trust in both the landlord, but also you have to put the trust in the tenant. And in most cases, the trust on either side can be a little bit wavery. Especially, I mean, the big problem we're dealing with people. So people will be people at the end of the day.
That's right. That's right. So, everybody handles their adult life differently. And of course, their adult finances differently. And they just adult differently. And some people are not very good at it.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I wanted to know, is there any particular story or case that you've heard of when it comes to either the tenant or the landlord, either or, where you can sort of remember that exemplifies this sort of issue?
I can. I had helped a young family. It was a couple with their toddler find some housing very quickly, and also other 4 young 20-year-olds were renting the other apartment in the same building. Unfortunately, the landlord was what I would call a slumlord and had rented this building out to people. I'm sure full well knowing that it was rat infested. So I had to help this young family and this other couple of young adults find housing as soon as possible. Thankfully, I was able to do it within less than 60 days. But in the meantime, that's where they had to live. They could hear the rats in the walls. The rats were coming out of the bathtub. It was a really horrible situation. So that was definitely a case of a slumlord, right? Definitely. But then I've also seen it where I've had a tenant who just decided they no longer wanted to pay for their apartment, and then proceeded to walk around in the backyard topless in front of the the children who were living on the upstairs floor. So and she was exercising her right, but she decided, to do that specifically after stopping to pay rent. And there was no reason for stopping to pay for rent. Um, every all of the services were being provided to her as per the agreement, a safe, quiet housing. Even the landlord was providing extras to this person out of the goodness of this heart, but that was the end result. It was unfortunate. So that was a case of a bad tenant, right? Or at least a tenant who just did not want to pay.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know which one I think is worse, though I have to say I do think rat infested sort of rubs me the wrong way, but
It was well, and in the case with the topless tenant, she also began to use a barrage of racial slurs against the landlord and his family as well, which is very distasteful, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah, distasteful I think is a very polite way of putting it, a very respectful way of putting it.
yes.
So, looking ahead, what would you say you can see in the next couple of years for the Ontario housing market? Do you see any trends that are up and coming? Maybe some unpredictability, especially with the tariffs right now. What do you think is maybe something that these landlords should be aware of coming in the next couple of years?
Well, I think that the whole landlord tenant situation will just become increasingly more complex. I know in the Niagara region, they are implementing some measures. Last I saw the headlines, anyways, now that there was going to be landlords that were going to be held accountable for tenant drug use. Now, as to what extent or what that looks like, certainly that's going to mean that it's going to be even less people that will want to get into that whole renting out their apartments to regular tenants that may come about, right? So I think that it's going to become increasingly more um, unfavorable for landlords to want to continue renting.
Mhm.
And we are certainly seeing that. There is a lot less people that want to get into that arena because it has become increasingly difficult. Now, in regards to the whole, I would say, home ownership overall, I think that we're going to continue to see, again, multi generational living. If we are seeing people who are buying their first home, they're definitely going to be looking for that extra spot to rent out in their basement. And they still, even knowing that they may have to uh, partake in paying GST, they may go down that route of doing the Airbnb. But certainly, if they're my first time home buyer, I will be educating them as to the fact that they'll be paying HST and try to encourage them to either go with long term tenants or to do some type of a travel professional that we've been talking about that your company provides.
Yeah, exactly. Just something that is more um guaranteed, less of a headache involved.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And then I think that's overall. I'm going to say that we will see some growth overall for all housing. So the housing prices will start to increase again. I certainly don't think it will be what we had seen previously with the pandemic because the housing prices went up astronomically. And I also think that it will be a continued trend that we're going to see that buyers and sellers will have more time to make these big decisions because I truly believe during the pandemic, it really did not work out favorably for most people because they had to make decisions so quickly. Perhaps maybe I guess you would say for the sellers, certainly it was more favorable, but the pressure on the buyers was certainly unrealistic. So right now, in this market, and this is across Canada, it is more of a buyer's market. Of course, there will be some other small pockets that might be anomalies, but for the most part, it's a buyer's market. So what we are seeing is that there's a lot more houses on the market and there's a lot less buyers. So the buyers that are there can certainly be a lot more demanding. And that means that the sellers have to negotiate more. So they may have to lower the price. They may have to change their closing dates to be more suitable to what the buyer needs. And certainly they may have to make other concessions in order to make that sale. And it also means that the houses that are selling, just to let you know, they're probably the ones that have that are most likely to have all the renovations done, and they're the ones that are most competitively priced to bring those buyers to them. Because buyers, they've got so many choices now. They don't need to choose a house that needs tons of renovations.
Yeah, that is so true. That is very true. And I think that's a good place to end off here, to end the episode on a nice piece of advice for people to listen out to and keep in the back of their mind as things move forward. And thank you, Beverly, for coming on. You've been a great guest.
You're welcome.
And if there's any place you want to send my listeners to that they can find you, either maybe like for real estate, or if they just want to keep up to date on some of your own personal things. Yeah.
Sure. Well, definitely people can find me on Instagram. They can also find me on Facebook. And I will be making a YouTube channel shortly. So you can also find me there, on LinkedIn, or you can just connect with me directly on WhatsApp, through my phone number. And I'd love to speak to anybody who has any questions about the real estate market here in Niagara, and help them find the house that suits their needs.
And all of that stuff, as per the usual, will be in the description. So if you do need any help in the Niagara region, you know who to reach out to.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me on, Sam.
Yeah, no problem. You've been great, Beverly. And I've been Sam. This has been Traveler's Haven. And I wish you safe travels.